And this is my weekly event where I continue to talk about the acorn brain and what I learned in my near death experience of about just how small minded my thinking was, and that amazingly enough, none of it goes with us into what I now call what's next. We shouldn't call death, we should call it what's next. There is what's next. And for everyone who thinks they've got this whole thing figured out, I mean, we live in something we don't understand. It's a miracle, right? It's a miracle. Or maybe you don't consider it that, but I'm going to talk about what the acorn brain is and what to do about it. So let's first talk about the acorn brain. It's actually, what I learned is resistance to the moment, resistance to life itself. And instead of embracing what shows up and looking at life as feedback, most of us resist the moment. And what it is it's life showing up as other than what we wanted. It doesn't fit our picture. So I'm going to quote a few examples. I'm going to give you some ideas from Mary O'Malley in her book, What's in the Way is the Way. So if you don't mind, indulge me, I'm going to read. Here's something I highlighted. As you learn to experience directly what you are experiencing, know that resistance will be a part of it. In fact, you could say that resistance lies at the core of your clouds of struggle. I love how she says that. You've spent most of your life resisting your experience. Well, that certainly defined me, and I was 50 in that month when I passed. Your mind may want to argue with that, but if you look closely, you will see that mostly you want your experience to be different than what it is rather than the real thing. And when we feel resistance, that's the acorn brain. We're just not embracing the moment. As Eckhart Tolle says, we're fighting life. And when you fight life, life fights you. So it's about learning that true mindfulness. And we hear that term mindfulness a lot. But it's about just accepting the moment and catching yourself, because the acorn brain is going to want to enroll you in, look at, this is true. You need to react. You need to tell them you're right or make others wrong or label something, which we see so much of today, broad brushes, labeling different groups. And whatever it is, you know the examples. All you have to do is look in the newspapers or listen to the news. And I suggest listen to less of that, because it's less news today than it is commentary. But let's go back to resistance that you feel. Let me read what Mary O'Malley goes on to say. To be fully awake to life means showing up for both the easy and the difficult, the joyous and the sorrowful. The truth is, being open to life means experiencing pain. It hurts to break your leg or to get the flu or COVID or to stub your toe. And everybody you love will die before you, or you will die before them. And I just hope it's not before the video's over. So the acorn brain is that resistance to life. And when we go to the gym, so I'm going to give a few examples about the gym. When we go to the gym or we're a runner or whatever it is we do, and we decide to add to our routine, let's say it's yoga and you add a new stretch, your body feels it. You build your endurance, but you go through the resistance. You don't say before you put on an extra 10 pounds of weight or run that extra half a mile, no, this is not for me. You have the consciousness of, I'm doing this to build my endurance or to build my strength or to build my ability to stretch, whatever it is to do, or hit the baseball farther or better, or throw the ball farther or better. Whatever it is that you're doing physically, we understand resistance. and we understand pushing beyond limits. But in Western society, there are so many ways to escape from whatever we're experiencing instead of learning to embrace life as feedback. Life is actually feedback. It's a cause and effect existence, right? As long as I'm doing that, I'm going to get the same result. Until I change it up, then I get a different result, a different sound from my banging. Well, it's the same thing for your life. When you're going through something difficult, what humans love to do, or at least what I did until I was 50, a lot of telling stories about what was going on, about when someone would share their pain, I would often share my own. Well, you want to hear what's happening to me? I had stories that I was telling myself. And wherever you're telling a story to others about a spouse, about a boss, about the job, about your employees or your company or the government or other political parties, wherever you're railing against something, you're just not embracing what is. Now, that doesn't mean you don't go and do whatever you can do, because that's healthy and productive, is to go do something about it. Except today, most don't. They're just railing on social media, for example, or even the commentators on news. They're just pointing out how they're right and others are wrong. And I don't take a side with this because it's all nuts. Like Eckhart Tolle says, some people think reality is nuts. Now, listen, it could be that we all die like my grandfather did, peacefully, not screaming in terror like his passengers. Or, I was angry when I was in the Waltham Hospital, especially on the 5th day when I had that near-death experience, because nobody told me to skip the tuna salad in the cafeteria. I'm making light of it. I was in the hospital 100 days. But consider for a minute, we have to have a sense of humor about dying. But better, we have to have a sense of humor about living and embracing everything that shows up. Now, Ram Dass called it "be here now." And Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now. But for a lot of people, that's a concept that is very hard to grasp. It's easier to think about resistance. We know all the events that we're telling other people the story about. We're gossiping about someone that made us angry, and we're telling others about what the boss did, or we're telling others about what the employees are up to, or maybe it's another department. But that's where you're in the acorn brain. That's your small-minded thinker. And it doesn't exist on the other side. It doesn't exist, which is fascinating. It has me looking forward to the next event, the next time I'm in what's next. Just not before this video is complete, I hope. But it doesn't matter because I know we go from this to that. It's just another moment. And the fascinating thing, while I was one with everything and nothing, one with the infinite or God or the divine or the goddess, it doesn't matter what you call it, there was no thinking like humans think. We think like God. We think we have control over this marble that's floating around an exposed nuclear fusion plant at the exact right spot for life to occur. We think, after all, we're making a difference, and we make a difference with all the things we do. I don't suggest that's not true. We should leave everything and everyone a little better than we find it in every moment. Imagine what that would do for this world. But there are things so much larger than us and out of our control. And COVID is a great example. What just occurred is to teach us to embrace all the gifts that showed up. Look at how now companies are much more comfortable with remote working. That's ideal. Talk about impacting the environment is less travel, fewer cars on the road, and even cars, of course, improving over time because we're conscious of our environment. But there are things so much larger than us at play in a universe. And so then what do you do What's a routine you can get into for what I call the acorn brain to break it? Do you go to the neuro gym as readily as you go to the physical gym, or go for a walk because you want to be healthy? But it's fascinating how many of us believe the thinking that is really small minded. Our job number one is to begin to look at modeling what we live in, something that's infinite, and to start pushing back against the resistance by embracing it, by looking at it. So here's some things to do. Consider a routine every day when you catch yourself, because that's the thing. You have to catch yourself in the story. Dr. Srikumar Rao, in his book, Are You Ready to Succeed? And Dr. Roland Alexander in Wise Mind, Open Mind, first suggest developing a level of thinking above your thinking. That means you have to first notice, what is it you're resisting? What is it you're railing against? Wayne Dyer often said that when you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. When we get squeezed, he said, that's something we need to work on. So you could begin to pay attention to, when you feel squeezed, what's your reaction? And start to notice what people you react to, what kinds of people you react to, what causes you to move from, say, a happy moment to a thought of depression, or even perhaps suicide, or anger at others, others who are none of our business. Their lives, their journeys are none of our business. Where are you in a monologue, for example, instead of a dialogue? If you're railing against a whole group of others, there's a place to begin to look at how small minded that is, as opposed to considering, how did people get to the views they have, and how do we compromise? It would be much healthier in our politics, for example, and even our leaders are not modeling poor behavior. We've fallen asleep, good behavior. We've fallen asleep to what good behavior is, which is a monologue, dialogue, compromise. So, first in your life, look at, when you're squeezed, what your reaction is. And when you're angry and thinking about vengeance, or you're making others wrong, or you're railing against others, wasting time on social media, trying to change people's minds, which will never be changed on social media, that's your small-minded thinker. So make a note of that, number one. Number two, Dr. Srikumar Rao talks about a screensaver. Most people, when I talk to my clients about it and I ask them to show me their screensaver, they've got a very beautiful picture of maybe a vacation, a lake view, their family, their pets, a newborn grandchild or a newborn child, but they have pictures of moments that bring them happiness, remind them of joy. He suggests, Dr. Srikumar Rao suggests, having a screensaver. Picture 4 or 5 moments that really have brought you joy in your life, and switch to that when you get squeezed and you notice yourself reacting, resisting life. And then after the screensaver, do you have another process? Do you have pictures around your office that bring you joy? Do you have a routine? Maybe there's a saying you put up on the wall. Like I have one that says, I'm looking at it now, the way out is through. It reminds me to be with the resistance, to face it and look at the gift that life is bringing me, because there hasn't been a moment where life hasn't brought me a gift, including my near death. Or as Frank King says to me, Steve, you have a serious lack of commitment near death. We have to get a sense of humor about ourselves and stop being afraid to live. That's the thing that holds us back. And when we can look at life as feedback, and that's one of the last steps, start to look at life as feedback and change from the automatic thought that wants you to automatically react and respond, and separate. Put some separation between these automatic thoughts, the acorn brain, the small minded thinker, and choose something new. Maybe it's a question you have on your screen. What's something different I could do today? I like to mention from somewhere, we all still see the horizon is flat. It didn't end with the Columbus days. We've read the stories of sailors being afraid to get on his ships because they were convinced you're going to fall off the edge of the world. The earth was flat, after all, in those days. That's what people thought. But we think we know it all now. We're still as far off from somewhere we all see the horizon is flat, and it might be all the people you reject because you blindly follow one group or another. I suggest not blindly following anyone or anything, including me. Prove it to yourself. That's the last step, is begin to prove to yourself that infinite, limitless thinking will change your life. Cause and effect. You'll have to get a new result. Now, will it always be perfect? No. It's a journey. It might lead to more resistance initially. And that's called an experiment. Like Thomas Edison said, he didn't consider his mistakes in making a light bulb mistakes. He called them, I just learned ways not to make a light bulb. Now, I wasn't there when he was interviewed, but it's purported that he reacted when people asked him, well, what do you think about all those times you failed to make a light bulb? And he was startled because he didn't look at it that way. So to look at your life as an experiment, and that you have power to create something different. I challenge you to consider that. Start to look at your small-minded thinking. And when you feel squeezed, look at the result, how you react, who you react to, what are the situations, and look at changing. Look at that as a gift, as life itself giving you an opportunity to grow. If you make your life an experiment, there won't be any failures. You're just learning ways not to live, not to react. And you're going to gain knowledge of your power. And you will prove it to yourself. Now, I'm not Jim Jones or like him. I'm not going to ask you to, or the sneaker cult, I'm not going to ask you to drink the Kool-Aid or leave your sneakers out tonight by the garage because the mothership might be coming. Have some fun. Experiment with your life. Look at who you're reacting to and what situations and where you have small-minded thinking, and start to challenge yourself. I love a book by Osho called, I love the title, Your Answers Questioned. Begin to question your answers, all the places you're making others wrong so you can be right. It might just be, well, tell me more about that. I have something to learn here. How did you come to that conclusion? What were the facts that you used? Maybe they didn't. Maybe they're just railing themselves. But you'll see the difference when you stop to observe others. Listen to the languaging others use. Many will tell you how small their lives are and how small-minded their thinking is because there's no room to consider any other position. You can see it on Twitter, on Facebook, and many other places in today's society. And we should be laughing at each other because when you think about history, when people blindly followed anyone or any idea or any concept, it has often led to despotic leaders and governmental systems that don't allow freedom. They don't allow dissent. That's what we are as a country, free. And when we start making each other wrong and not allowing dissent, and even the government is getting involved, it's craziness. But you have to prove that to yourself. I love being an independent thinker. Think about that. I want to consider all sides of an issue, and then I'm still open to changing my mind because I've proven it to myself what a difference it makes, and had the gift of a near-death experience, or what's next. I had a glimpse of what's next. The fascinating thing that we all hear about in other people's near-death experiences is, in my life review, only the lives I had touched flashed before me, only the good I had done. Now, I can't say that I've lived a sin-free life. I've taught some people forgiveness, and many others are teaching me that. But I've come to have a sense of humor about living and living in the moment fully and embracing what shows up. Now, do I still have some resistance to things that show up? Yes. It's a journey. I mean, after all, I wrote the book, You Might Be Full of Shit If. I also wrote You Might Be Full of Number Two. After all, we know better, the woke edition, because I wanted to be also PC. But in general, I'm making fun of not one side or the other. You'd have to read the books to prove it to yourself. Don't take my word for it. But in the books, I'm just pointing out where we've all shut down certain views and certain sides of thinking. And I'm not espousing either left nor right. Both sides are wrong. What I'm espousing is small-minded thinking. What I'm talking about is breaking through small-minded, limited, acorn brain thinking and modeling this infinite existence that we live in, a universe that we think we know so much. I think we're as far off as the Incas were, and I've said that before, and the Aztecs when they were sacrificing princesses and babies to the gods. We're probably that far off, most likely. And that's why I want people to consider, and why I think it's important, is to consider breaking through small-minded thinking, not just because it might make the world better or your country or your home or your neighborhood, but your life better. But again, you have to prove that to yourself. And if you can build a routine, I challenge you to think about going to the neuro gym or building a routine. If gym scares you and makes you uncomfortable, build a routine. Put a screensaver up in your mind. Maybe it's the one you have on your computer now. Something that brings you back to joy. But the routine is to first build a level of thinking above your thinking. Start to look at when life squeezes you, it's pointing you to address something, not to go tell the neighbors about or jump on social media and make a whole bunch of others wrong. It makes life more fun when you stop trying to manage others. I learned that I had a lot of difficulty managing my own life, and that's when I decided to give up trying to change others or manage others. It was madness. So think about it. Think about what Eckhart Tolle says. When you fight life, life fights you. And think about what Mary O'Malley says, is to get to the place where you embrace resistance. There will be things that are very uncomfortable. I had a brother commit suicide. I've had 2 other brothers pass away and my sister. 2 of those were from cancer. Life doesn't fit our picture very often, but it becomes more comfortable. when you can embrace what shows up and look at resistance as a gift, life as feedback. Take some time to ponder it. If you don't agree, that's fine. Remember, I do have podcasts. If we ever meet, I might ask you, does that sound like small-minded thinking? Just work on you and work on stretching that small-minded thinker that exists, at least in me, but I suspect you know what I'm talking about. Thanks. Until next time, next Friday, 1 o'clock. Any questions, email me, steve@stevelentini.com, steve@stevelentini.com. I've also written the book, Wake Up, Jump Into Your Life. It's on Amazon, along with other books I've written. Consider what I'm saying or not. Either way, it's okay. But in a cause and effect world, consider where you're the cause and what shows up is the effect you created. Thanks.